A very good morning, students. Today we will be studying another topic of English language, and the topic that we will be covering today is active and passive voice. It is chapter number 15 and in our English language textbook. And what do we understand by active and passive voice? Children, the way we speak our sentence, the way we place the words in a sentence, the way we structure it, construct it, is can be in two ways: active voice and passive voice. Okay, so what is the difference between active voice and passive voice? What do we understand by active voice? What do we understand by passive voice? How do we use it? We are going to learn in this chapter. Okay, children, so let's continue. There are two examples given over here, children. The following two sentences say the same thing but in two different ways. Let's see how. Arvind drove the car. The car was driven by Arvind. What do you feel, children? They are saying one and the same thing, right? Arvind drove the car. The car was driven by Arvind. The meaning of the two sentences is that there is a car and there is a person, Arvind, and he is driving the car. But it has been said in two different ways, right? So this is what voice is, children. This is active voice. This is passive voice. Okay, so what do we understand by this active voice? We understand that Arvind is the subject and he's doing some action. Arvind drove, the action of driving. What? The car. Okay, in the second sentence we see this is a passive voice. The subject is the car. Okay, was driven. So the car, an action was performed on the car. The action of driving was performed on the car. So in the first sentence, Arvind is very active. He's doing something. So it is active voice. In the second sentence, the car was driven. The car is not doing any action. An action is performed on the car. So the car is passive. What is the meaning of passive, children? Not doing any action. Just simply being as it is, not doing anything. Something is being performed on it. So this is how we come to know active and passive voice. Okay. The first sentence tells us what Arvind did. The second tells us what was done to the car. Now these are two simple ways. Don't get into the entire explanation. These are two simple ways, children, of coming to know active and passive voice. Whether the subject is doing an action or whether an action is performed on the subject. You have Arvind over there, he's doing some action. You have the car over there in the second example in which an action is performed on it. So very simple. If we look at the sentences closely, we find that drove is the verb in this example and Arvind is the subject. Who drove the car? Arvind. Secondly, verb drove is transitive. Now, first of all, children, tell me what is the meaning of transitive verb? A transitive verb is when the action is passed to an object. Okay, so if you see, drove is the action, it is passed to an object. Some action is performed on the object car. So this is a transitive verb. Okay, children. So the verb drove is transitive because it has an object, car. Okay. Drove what? The car. It is the subject in A. It is the subject Arvind, that is the doer or performer of the action of driving. In other words, the subject is the agent. That is, the subject did something and what the subject did affected another person, another object, that is the car. Okay, so overall they are trying to explain, children, that if it is an active sentence, there is an agent. Oblique, agent meaning doer. Doer meaning somebody is doing something. And in this example, Arvind is that subject, so it is an active voice. And the action that Arvind is performing is getting performed on something. What is that something? Car. Okay, children? A sentence in which the subject of the verb is the agent or doer of the action denoted by the verb is said to be in the active voice. So simply the meaning is subject is doing an action. Active, energetic, working. Our subject is working. Our subject is energetic. Our subject is not just sitting like that, or passive. The subject is active, that is, it acts or does something. But in sentence B, the verb is was driven. Let's get back, children. The car was driven. What is the subject over here, children? The car. What is the verb? Was driven. Okay, let's get back to the explanation. The verb is was driven and the subject is car. What was driven? The car. In the sentence, the subject is not the agent. What is the meaning of agent, children? Somebody is doing something. So, subject is not the agent, subject is the car, and the car is not doing something. So, the subject is not the agent, that is, it does not do anything. On the contrary, something was done to the subject, something was done to the car. It is the subject car which was acted upon or was affected by the action. Secondly, as the subject did not do anything, somebody or something else could not have been affected by it. What is the meaning of this point, children? Like, Arvind drove the car. Drove is a verb and the action is passed to an object, car. The action of driving is performed on the car. So, car is the object. It is a transitive verb, right? But over here, since the subject is not doing anything only, so the action cannot be passed to an object. So, passive voice does not have an object. I'll explain once over here, children. Please look at it carefully. In active voice, the subject is there, children. S for subject. He is doing something. Okay, he is doing an action. And the action is passed to an object. Okay, but in passive voice, children, the subject is there, children. Okay, but the subject is not doing an action. So, no object. So, there will be no object. All passive voices are intransitive verbs. Intransitive verbs because the action is not being passed to an object. Okay, children. I hope these points are clear about active and passive voice. A sentence in which the subject does not perform the action denoted by the verb but is acted upon is said to be passive voice. Passive meaning, children, not active. Our subject is not active. The subject does not act. If you look at the two verbs, now this is another important point, children. Two verbs. Which are the two verbs they are talking about? Drove, was driven. If you look at the two verbs, you will find that they are different forms of the same verb drive. Okay, let's get back over here, children. 1 minute. They are saying that when we are changing from active to passive, drive is the main base verb. And we are sometimes using it like drove and sometimes using it as was driven. So basically, it is different form, right, children? Sometimes it is used in the present form, sometimes in the past form, present continuous, past continuous. So different for future tense. So different form of the same verb is being used, children. So the form of a verb tells us its voice. So basically, from reading the sentence, we come to know whether it is in the active voice or in the passive voice because of the kind of verb used, form of verb used. We can therefore say that voice is that form of a verb which shows whether or not the subject of the verb is the agent of the action denoted by the verb. We basically, the meaning of this is, children, we come to know whether it is active voice or passive voice just by the form of verb used. How? We will be coming to know the kind of form of verbs in the next explanation. So now, children, we understand what is active voice and what is passive voice. Okay, here the subject is active, here the subject is passive. Okay, children, now we will come to know difference between active and passive voice in a more detailed way, so that we don't do any mistake in identifying active and passive voice. Okay, in getting to know which sentence is active, which sentence is passive, these points are going to help us. Please listen carefully. We can now summarize the difference between the two voices. So, the subject of an active verb is the agent. The subject, over there the subject was Arvind, is agent. Agent means doing something. Doer. Doer means someone who does something of the action. Which action? Driving. Denoted by the verb. So, which is the verb? Driving. The subject of a passive voice. Which was the subject of the passive voice, children? Passive verb. The subject was the car. Is not the agent. Is not the doer of the action denoted by the verb. Very clear points to differentiate between the two. The subject is acted upon or affected by the action. So the car is acted upon. That is was driven. Okay. Denoted by the verb. Which verb? Driven. Being was driven. It is passive. That is inactive. Okay. In a sentence, in the passive voice, the agent of the action denoted by the verb may or may not be mentioned. Okay. Now children, listen carefully. This is an important point. In a passive voice, sometimes children, the person doing the action is not mentioned. Like in the active voice, children, the person doing the action is the subject, Arvind. It was mentioned, right? But in this passive voice, children, sometimes the person doing the action is not mentioned. See this example. A tiger was seen near the river. Okay, so a tiger is the subject over here. Was seen. So tiger was seen. The action of seeing the tiger is being performed by someone. Who is that person? We don't know. So the doer is not mentioned. The agent is not mentioned. The person, the object who's seeing the tiger is not mentioned. And the tiger is doing anything? No. He was just near the river doing something, maybe drinking water. So the tiger is relaxed, inactive. Our subject is inactive. It is a passive sentence. Our subject is not interested in doing anything. Our tiger is nicely near the river and he's not doing anything. But somebody is seeing him. We don't know whom. This sentence does not tell us who or what saw the tiger. That is the agent or doer of the action denoted by the verb was seen is not mentioned. Okay, children? Very simple it is. In a sentence in the passive voice, if we want to mention the agent, we have to use a preposition after the passive verb and then mention the agent. So over here they are saying, if you want an agent, like in the previous sentence, a tiger was seen near the river. We don't have an agent, children. We don't have the doer. So if you want a doer, you have to put a preposition. They are saying. Let's see how. A tiger was seen near the river by the villagers. So over here, by is the preposition and then we can have the doer or the agent. The villagers are the doer or the agent. Okay. The agent then becomes the object of the preposition. So this is the preposition and this preposition is said to have an object, the villagers. The villagers will be the object of this preposition. Okay children. Whenever a preposition is added like that, then the object will become the object of the preposition. The room was crowded with people. Okay, so over here children, they are saying the room was crowded. This is also fine, right? But to get the agent, to get the doer, who are the doer? Who are filling the room? Who are crowding the room? The people. So to get the people, we've used the preposition with. Okay, let's get back for a minute so that you get it very simple. Here they've told in the first point of difference between active and passive voice. The doer is there, the agent is there. Here the subject is inactive. Okay, third example, sometime there is no agent. Okay, if you want an agent in the passive voice, use a preposition. Simple children. The preposition by is used after the passive verb was seen and then the agent villager is mentioned. The agent, a common noun, villagers becomes the object of the preposition by. Okay, now next point children. In E, the preposition which, with, over here with is used children. With is used after the passive verb crowded. Okay, passive verb was crowded and then the agent, people, crowded the room is mentioned. The agent subject, this is the verb, okay, this is the preposition, and this is the object. It could have been just this much, but we wanted a doer, so we've used a preposition and an object. And now this object will be the object of preposition with. This object will be the object of the preposition by. Understood, children? Next point of difference. The form of the passive verb is different from that of the corresponding active verb. I have just told you all, children, that the form is going to be different, and the form will tell us whether it is an active verb or a passive verb. Okay, usually the passive verb is made up of an appropriate form of verbs. So in passive, children, in passive sentences, passive voice, we have very selective set of forms of verb. If you know that, if you master that, if you are continuously practicing that, then you'll make no mistakes. Okay, so the base form, which is the standard form which is used, appropriate form of verb, be plus the past participle form of the active verb. Okay, children? For example, was seen was a past tense form of be plus seen is the past participle of see. Okay, so over here they are trying to say that whenever you want if you want a passive voice to be made to be active voice to be changed into passive voice, then you have to follow this format: be plus past participle of the verb. Okay, so over here, was seen, how did we derive was seen? Be, the past tense of be is was, and the past tense of see is seen. So we've derived that was seen, which can be used in the passive sentence. Was crowded. Was is the past tense of be, and crowded is the past participle of crowd. You will learn this once you practice more examples. There will be a table we'll be doing just now. However, when the agent is not mentioned or not known, an appropriate form of the verb get is sometimes used instead of be. So sometime instead of be we can use get. Okay, get plus the past participle of the verb. So sometimes you'll use be plus the past participle, sometimes you'll use get plus the active verb, the verb. Many soldiers got killed in that battle. So got is the past tense of get plus past participle of the verb kill is killed. Okay, this is how we will change from active to passive voice. Whenever you are changing from active to passive voice, you will take the appropriate form be plus past participle, get plus past participle. We'll study a few more examples. Many letters get lost in the post. So get, that is the present tense of get, plus past participle of the verb lose. So lost. So children, like this, when you will be practicing more sentences, you will be able to change active voice to passive voice just by forming a standard appropriate form change which they have mentioned over here. Okay, children, there is no complexities in changing from active to passive voice. You just have to practice these two types of formats: be plus past participle, get plus past participle. Okay, Ram will surely get elected president this time. Future tense form of get, that is plus past participle of the verb elect, elected. Okay, children? Changing from active to passive voice. So now we've seen a table in which the way we have to change, they tried to explain us. We will be having a table now to study the same thing. Changing from active to passive voice. It should be clear now that in changing the voice from active to passive, we have to make certain changes. Do we have to make changes, children? From changing from active to passive voice? Yes, we have to make changes. Why? Because in an active voice, we have an active subject. And in a passive voice, we have a passive subject. Okay? So how do we come to know? Make certain changes. They are summarized below. The object of the verb, active verb, becomes the subject of the passive verb. Okay, so the first part, the object of the active verb. Which was the sentence which we had just studied, children? We had studied the sentence. Just a minute, children. I'll write down the sentence again so that we can study these changes. Arvind drove the car. Okay, this was the example. I'm taking this simple example again and again so that you understand this very well. The object of the active verb. This is an active voice, okay? Object. Which is the object, children? Car. The object of the active verb becomes the subject. So this will go and become the subject if we have to change it into passive voice, okay? So we will have the car was driven by Arvind. So the object over here, children, will become the subject. Okay, so whenever you're changing from active to passive voice, our object, the last word, will go straight and become the subject. It is therefore follows that only active transitive verbs with objects can be changed into passive voice. What are they trying to say, children? Suppose there was no object, children. Okay, suppose there was no object. This is a transitive verb. This is a transitive verb. It has an object. Sometimes if there is no object, we cannot change it to a passive voice. Why? Because passive voice requires an object. Therefore follows that only active transitive verbs with objects can be changed into passive voice. So all sentences in active voice cannot be changed into passive voice. Okay, children? Because active voice, if it does not have an object, it is an intransitive verb, then it will not be able to be changed to the passive voice. This point is clear, children? When you are changing to active to passive, you have to take the object, put it in the subject. Okay? The subject of the active voice. So we will rewrite this so that it is more clear to us. I want every point to be very clear. Arvind drove the car. So the second point is the subject of the active verb. This is the subject. Can be mentioned only with the help of a preposition. So the car was driven by Arvind. So when we are writing the car was driven by is the preposition, children. Look carefully. By Arvind. So we cannot write the subject over here to the object's place without the preposition. Okay, clear this point also, children? Next point. An active transitive verb may have two objects. Now this is another very complex point. Sometimes they have two verbs, two objects. How will we deal while changing into the passive voice? Let's see. Because over here, when there was one object, children, the car was the object. We took the car right in front, right, children? We took the car and made it the subject. Suppose there are two objects. What will we do? Direct and indirect object. Mr. Sen taught us English. Okay. Mr. Sen taught what? English. That is the direct object. Mr. Sen taught whom? Us. That is the indirect object. In changing the voice to passive, any one of the objects can be selected. Okay, children? Any one of the object can be made the subject. The other object becomes the object of the passive verb and is then known as the retained object. So children, over here we have Mr. Sen taught us English. Okay. So either you can take English over there as the subject or you can take us as the subject over there. And the one which you take, the other object will be left behind and will be known as a retained object. We have retained it. We have kept it. Okay. So for example, English goes there, children. English was taught to us by Mr. Sen. Okay. Then sometime we take us over there. We were taught English by Mr. Sen. Understood, children? So English is retained over here and us is retained over here. Us, the indirect object of the active verb taught, is the retained object in this example, and English, the direct object of the active verb taught, is the retained object in this example. Understood, children? Very, very simple points when you are changing from direct to active voice to passive voice. Note, however, that in some cases the preposition to is used in the passive voice. Okay, so you have to use preposition sometimes in the passive voice. Don't forget to use that before the noun, that is the indirect object in the active voice. How do we come to know, children? The principal, subject, gave. Principal is doing something. It is an active voice because gave, principal is giving something, doing an action. Gave Veena a prize. Veena is the object. Now when we are changing it to passive voice, Veena was given. Something was being done to Veena. A prize was being given to Veena. So Veena is the subject over here, but it is a passive voice by the principal. A prize was given to Veena by, this is another way to write it because there are two objects. A prize was given to Veena by the principal. So when we are writing this way, children, when we've taken prize, the object over there, then we have to put to before the noun. We have to put to before Veena. We cannot say a prize was given Veena by the principal. That will be wrong. A prize was given to Veena by the principal. You have to put the preposition before the noun when you are changing and taking one of the objects in front. Okay, children? Veena is the object of the preposition to. So, Veena will become the object of the preposition to. Now, depending on the tense of the active verb, an appropriate passive form of the verb be has to be used with the past participle form of the active verb to get the passive form. Now, here they are trying to tell us how to change. Like I told your children, you will use, whenever you're changing from active to passive voice, there is an appropriate form, a standard form to be followed, that is be plus past participle. Okay, past participle. Okay, so active voices, a cat ate the fish. How will you change it, children? The fish, what is the past participle of be? Was. The fish was. The past tense of ate, eaten. The fish was eaten by a cat. The tense of the active verb ate is simple past. So, the appropriate passive form of the verb will be was is used. The past participle of the active verb ate is eaten. So, was eaten. With be it became was, and with ate it became eaten. Okay, children? Then it became a passive voice. Active sentence, I have written a letter. Okay, when you're making it into a passive sentence, a letter has been written by me. So, we've taken the letter over there in front, we've taken I in the object's place, and we've changed the tense, the form of the verb. The tense of the active verb is present perfect. So, the appropriate passive form of the verb be is has been. So, we've taken be as has been, and we have taken the past participle of write, that is written. Okay, active sentence, they were learning a new song. So again we will be taking the be, a new song was, and the past participle being learnt by them. Okay, the tense of the active verb is past continuous. Over here this is a continuous, past continuous sentence. So, the appropriate passive form of be is was being. The past participle form of learn is learned. Note also that the plural word learning becomes singular. Here they are trying to tell about this example, children, that here when we were talking about the learners, they were learning, that's plural. But when the object went in front, song is just one single song, right, children? So we've changed the plural to singular. That is, a new song was being learned. We are not talking about plural because we are talking about a single song over here. Okay, we have to keep the singular and plural point in mind while changing active to passive. Now this table, a table of active and passive form of the verb do is in the various tenses is given below. This table, just go through it again and again, children. The more you go through it, you will make lesser mistakes in changing the active to passive voice. Okay, so he does it, in the simple present will become it is done by him. He is doing it. We will not change the tense, you know. He is doing it. It is being done by him. Present perfect, this is also present perfect. He has done it. It has been done by him. Simple past, he did it. It was done by him. Past continuous, he was doing it. It was being done by him. Okay, it's just that the interchange of words is there, otherwise the tense will not change. He will do it. It will be done by him. He will be doing it. It will be done by him. Rarely used. This is a very rare example, children. He will have done it. It will have been done by him. Okay. These are some complex sentences which we will be dealing later, not specifically here in our examples and exercises. Okay. When an active transitive verb of incomplete prediction is made passive. Now this is something complex. Now we know what is active voice, we know what is passive voice. We know the difference between the two also, children. And we know how to change an active voice to passive voice. Maybe a little practice is required. Now there are few examples wherein when an active transitive verb, okay, let's come to this example, children. Arvind drove the car. Okay, so we have an active, this is an active subject, active voice. Transitive verb, yes, this is a transitive verb because it has an object. Active transitive verb of incomplete prediction. So this is not the suitable example, children, because they are saying incomplete prediction. When is it incomplete prediction, children? When it has an object, still the sentence does not make sense. They will give us some example over here. Let's go to that example. Okay, children. So incomplete prediction is made passive. So we have to be very careful when we have incomplete prediction and we are changing the voice. The objective complement becomes a subjective complement because the object of the active verb becomes the subject of the passive verb. A little complicated. I will simplify it with an example. Okay. So this is the active example. The people made him the king of that land. Let's deal one by one. Active sentence. The people made. Subject. Which is the subject, children? People. Made. So people are doing something. So it is an active sentence. That point is past. Okay. Transitive verb. Made him. Made him the king. The action of making is passed to an object. Him is the object, children. This passed to an object, him. So children, this is an active transitive verb, which is the action is being passed to an object and it has an object. Of incomplete prediction. Why incomplete prediction, children? Because the object ends over here. So if this is the sentence, the people made him. Does that make sense? The people made him. That doesn't make sense. It does not stand on its own. It requires more words. So, the king of that land. So, this part, the king of the land, is basically objective complement. Why is it objective complement? Because it is in the place of the object. Okay, children? So, object, him is the object. The king of the land is the objective complement. Now, suppose if this sentence has to be changed into passive voice, children. So, how will we do? We will take the objective complement, take it in front with the subject and make it the subjective complement. How? Let's see. Passive form. He is him. Him goes over, the subject goes over there. He was made the king of that land by the people. So, he is the subject. The king of that land becomes the subjective complement. Understood? Little complicated, but you will understand with more practice. Okay, children? Next example. Active sentence. Everybody called Govinda a fool. Okay? So, children, when we are changing it to the passive voice, Govinda will become the subject, was called is the verb, the action, and a fool becomes the subjective complement. Okay, now given below are two examples of how an imperative sentence is used, where no one is mentioned, no subject is mentioned, no doer is mentioned. Switch off the light. Let the lights be switched off. Please do not eat inside the auditorium. You are requested not to eat inside the auditorium. These are some exceptional cases where an imperative sentence is there. So you have to utilize it like this in making it into a passive voice. Okay, children? Now some points we need to keep in mind. When we are talking about voice, children, we are talking about active and passive voice, right? So these two voices are with regard to sentences, clauses and verbs. The term voice is applicable to verbs, clauses and sentences. There are two types of voices, the active and passive voice. The active voice is the basic type. Okay? The two voices enable us to look at the same action in two different ways. Which ways, children? From the point of view of the doer and from the point of view whether some action is being performed on something. So the voice looks at the action from the point of view of the doer. The passive voice looks at the action from the point of view of the person or object affected by the action. So the choice is ours. The choice is which voice to use depends on what we want to emphasize or which point we want to highlight. Okay? The passive voice is generally used in writing reports. In writing reports or formal reports or some kind of submissions wherein we want to tell what has been done. And who is doing it, that is not important. What all has been accomplished or achieved. For in such cases, what is done, has been done or needs to be done is more important than the agent. Next point, the passive voice is used when the agent is obvious or known. We already know the agent. We don't need to get a clarification about that. The doer we already know, or people in general are the agents. It is said that she is very intelligent person. In this case, children, who is the doer? People are saying, they are saying, right? So they say. So it is a very generalized, subject, doer, and we don't need to mention it. People are treated free of charge at this hospital. Okay, so that's the subject, people, and they are being treated. So it is a passive sentence wherein the treatment is being received by them. By whom? Obviously the hospital staff. So that doer is not mentioned, but overall the hospital is mentioned over here. Loans for buying houses can be obtained from banks. Okay, so over here also the doer is not mentioned. Maybe an authority is mentioned, but doer is not mentioned. Such violence cannot be tolerated. The doer is not mentioned. Okay, it is a generalized statement where we understand we are talking about criminals, or we are talking about the bank agents, or we are talking about the hospital staff. Okay, the passive voice is used when we do not want to mention or do not know who the agent is. So this is also where the passive voice is used in such cases, or want to avoid saying something unpleasant or harsh. So in these examples, children, we've understood that we can, to our benefit, we can use active or passive voice. Over here, we didn't mention the doer, so we can use passive voice. Okay, so now you will need to practice. There are two exercises, A and B, in the chapter. Please do it in your language notebook. Please practice the sentences, and if you don't understand, then you can get back to me. Okay, children? Thank you, children. Have a nice day.